Most people believe that the world rewards those who do more, those who move faster, those who strive harder, those who occupy more space. This belief is not only popular, it is socially accepted, it is taught, it is repeated. And precisely for that reason, it is rarely questioned. But it doesn't explain reality completely. Because, if that were true, the most exhausted would be the most prosperous, and they are not. If that were true, whoever runs the fastest would always be in the lead. And it isn't. There is something quieter operating beneath all visible action. And that something is sustained thought. Not quick thinking, not anxious thinking. Not the kind of thinking that changes according to one's mood of the day. But coherent thought, stable, aligned, that's the law. Doing too much doesn't create success. Acting excessively only amplifies the internal state of the one who acts. If thought is confused, action spreads confusion. If thought is unstable, action creates wear and tear. If thought wavers, action loses strength. Action never corrects a misaligned mind. She simply exposes it. That's why so many people do so much. And they remain in the same place. That's why so many people are taking action, trying, persisting. And they feel that something always slips away at the last minute. It's not for lack of trying. It's an excess of misaligned thinking. Thinking correctly is not the same as thinking positively. Thinking correctly doesn't mean repeating phrases. Thinking correctly doesn't mean convincing yourself of something your body can't support. Thinking correctly means not contradicting yourself internally. It's when thought, emotion, and expectation move in the same direction. No internal conflict. Without constant negotiation. No noise. When that happens, something changes immediately. Even though nothing external has changed yet, the body relaxes, breathing deepens. Internal time slows down, and this slowdown is not laziness. It's stability. A stable nervous system provides more support. He always maintained it. Most people live in a state of accelerated pace because they live in internal conflict. He wants something, but he has doubts. He wants it, but he's afraid. Move forward, but mentally retreat. This state creates constant movement, without real direction. It's like rowing hard in turbulent waters without choosing a direction. It's tiring, it wears you down. But it won't get you very far. Thinking correctly means choosing an internal focus and remaining on it. Even when the environment fluctuates, even when there is no immediate validation. This creates density, and density creates presence. Presence is not performance. Presence is not the same as charisma. Presence is emotional consistency that lasts over time. The world responds to this. He always answered, not through judgment. By nature, life trusts those who don't contradict themselves. Life revolves around those who maintain a clear inner focus. When thought is stable, action becomes simple, direct, economical. There is no wasted energy trying to prove something. There's no excessive movement to compensate for insecurity. There is only continuity. A misaligned mind lives in constant correction. Do it and revise it. Speak up and adjust. Decide and undo. This generates invisible fatigue. A tiredness that doesn't come from the body. It stems from internal fragmentation. Internal fragmentation is incompatible with sustained prosperity. You might even achieve something in this state, but it doesn't hold up, because sustaining requires calm. And calm only exists where there is coherence. Thinking correctly means stopping arguing with yourself. It's about putting an end to internal debates that should have ended long ago. It's about not reevaluating identity with every external stimulus. When you think correctly, you occupy an inner space. And when it occupies a space, something changes in the surrounding field. People can sense it. Opportunities respond. The environment adjusts, effortless, no need to insist. This is not mystical, it's structural. Most people act recklessly because they lack confidence in their own thinking. Age to compensate, age to feel valid. act to avoid inner silence. But inner silence is precisely where prosperity is born. Not empty silence, aligned silence, where there is no rush, where there is no urgency, where there is no fear disguised as movement. Thinking correctly means knowing what to ignore. Not every stimulus deserves a response. Not every possibility deserves attention. Not every opportunity is for you. An aligned mind knows this effortlessly. She doesn't blame herself. She doesn't explain herself. She simply follows. This following isn't stubbornness. It's about loyalty to one's own core values. Over time, something settles in, a feeling of solidity. A calmness that doesn't depend on the environment. You don't need to run. You don't need to compete. You don't need to prove it. His presence changes. And when presence changes, everything changes. The aura of success is born right here, not through excessive action, but in the quality of thought that precedes each movement. Thinking correctly creates a reliable field. And reliable fields attract responsibility, value, and opportunities, not because they ask, because they support it. Aligned thinking does not create anxiety. It creates inevitability. You feel you're in the right place, even without external guarantees. You act when it's necessary, not when you're insecure. You wait when necessary, without feeling like you're behind schedule. Internal time changes. And this is deeply perceived by others. People who think correctly convey confidence without even speaking. They don't put pressure on them. They don't insist. They don't beg. They remain. And what remains becomes the benchmark. Thinking correctly is more powerful than acting excessively because it defines the quality of everything that comes after. It defines how you react, define what you tolerate, define what you stand for. A mind that is aligned does not sabotage itself after small victories. She doesn't panic when given more responsibility. She doesn't lose her focus when something goes right. She supports it. That's inner maturity. And inner maturity is the true foundation of abundance. Without her, everything is unstable. With her, everything falls into place. You don't need to do anything more. You need to contradict yourself less. You don't need to speed up. You need to get aligned. When this happens, something within you stabilizes. The body understands. The mind slows down. The presence deepens. You support more. Your energy changes. Your field changes. And the world responds. That's the law. This is inevitable. This always works. Thinking correctly is a form of inner silence. Not empty silence, but resolute silence. When you think correctly, there's no constant internal debate. There are no competing voices inside you. There is a clear line. This type of thinking does not arise from force. It stems from the repeated choice not to fragment. The fragmentation is subtle. She doesn't scream. She whispers. It appears when you say yes, when you mean no. When you act before you feel aligned. When you over-explain because you don't trust your own field. Each small fragmentation creates a fissure. And cracks drain energy. Most people don't realize how much energy they waste trying to maintain different versions of themselves throughout the day. A more confident version for certain environments. Another, more reserved one for others. Another one is more aggressive when it feels threatened. This requires constant effort. And constant effort does not build prosperity. Thinking correctly means integrating. It's about being the same in different contexts, not out of rigidity, but for the sake of consistency. When you are consistent, the world relaxes around you. People feel they don't need to get tested. There's no need to force it. You don't need to guess. You are predictable in the best sense of the word. And predictability creates trust. Trust is an invisible asset. It precedes any real opportunity. A mind that thinks correctly is not in a constant state of alert. She's not expecting the next problem. She is not preparing to defend herself. She is present. And presence changes everything. A person who is present doesn't need to rush. She doesn't react impulsively. She doesn't act in the meantime because she's afraid. She responds when called. This creates a different internal rhythm. A rhythm that cannot be imposed from the outside. This rhythm can be felt and respected. The world revolves around those who have their own rhythm. Those who live at an accelerated pace internally are behind on the outside, because it always arrives in excess. Too many words, too many justifications, excessive anxiety. Those who think correctly arrive whole, arrive on time. It arrives with clarity. Thinking correctly also means not dramatizing the process. A misaligned mind turns everything into an emergency. Everything seems definitive. Everything seems like a last chance. This creates pressure, and pressure distorts decisions. A mind that is aligned knows that it doesn't need to rush, because she's not getting lost. She knows that what is consistent returns. She knows that what is solid remains. This certainty is not emotional. It's structural. It comes from the repeated experience of sustaining a thought until the end, without giving up halfway, without switching to another one at the first sign of discomfort. Thinking correctly means maintaining an internal state even when the environment is not cooperating, even when there is external silence, even when there is no immediate response. This is the point where many give up, not due to a lack of ability, but due to a lack of internal stability. They confuse a lack of immediate feedback with a directional error, and they change. They change their minds. They change their posture. They change their energy. And the cycle begins again. Thinking correctly breaks this cycle, because it doesn't depend on external confirmation to maintain itself. When you think correctly, you don't keep checking all the time to see if it's working, and knowing is not arrogance. It's alignment. This difference is noticeable. People who think correctly don't ask permission to exist. They don't adjust too much to fit. They do not shrink their own territory to avoid conflict. They remain. And what remains creates space around it. Prosperity needs space. It doesn't thrive in cramped indoor spaces, full of fear, full of doubt, full of urgency. It settles where there is capacity to receive it without collapsing. Thinking carefully prepares that space, not through views, not through statements, but through sustained consistency. The body learns, the nervous system learns. He understands that he doesn't need to react to everything, that you don't need to defend yourself all the time. And when the nervous system understands this, it allows expansion. Expansion is not excitement, it's tolerance. Tolerance for more responsibility. Tolerance for increased visibility. Tolerance for more impact. A misaligned mind even desires more, but he doesn't tolerate it. She resorts to sabotage. In confusion, overthinking, thinking correctly creates ability, capacity to sustain. This completely changes the relationship with the world. You don't chase after them. You don't chase. You don't beg. You take a stand, and the positioning is silent. It's an internal state that says, I am here. I know who I am. I support it. It is felt before it is understood. Life responds to this because that's how it organizes itself. Stable fields are attractive. Unstable fields disperse. It's always been this way. Thinking correctly means choosing to be a stable ground. Even when everything around seems chaotic. Even when there is outside noise. You don't have to participate in the noise. You don't need to react. Reacting is a sign of instability. Responding is a sign of presence. An aligned mind responds. The confused mind reacts. This difference defines destinations. Thinking correctly also redefines value. Not the financial value, the internal value. When you think straight, you don't offer yourself cheaply. You don't disrespect yourself by trying to be accepted. You don't compromise principles to keep things moving. You prefer less with coherence than a lot with noise, and that changes everything. The world notices when someone is unavailable for anything. This creates respect. Respect is another invisible asset of prosperity. Without respect, nothing can stand. Thinking correctly earns respect effortlessly, because you're not asking. You are being. An aura of success is formed in this state. It's not something you put on. It is something that emerges when thought stabilizes. You start to occupy space in a natural way, without invading, without hiding. This balance is rare. And what is rare is valued. Thinking correctly also changes your relationship with error. A misaligned mind dramatizes mistakes. An aligned mind adjusts without losing its center. She's not defined by her mistakes. She doesn't have a meltdown. She's learning. And so it goes. This creates continuity. Continuity creates construction. Construction creates prosperity. Not in a superficial sense, but in the deeper sense of something that grows without collapsing. Thinking correctly eliminates the need for proof. When you don't need to prove anything, you don't expose yourself too much. You don't sell yourself. You don't force yourself. You act when you are genuine. This truth is felt. And people respond to the truth. Opportunities respond to truth. No to performance. The performance is tiring. The truth holds true. Thinking correctly is a silent commitment to oneself. A commitment not to give up. Most people abandon themselves several times a day. When you ignore your own discomfort. When you force something you don't feel. When you accept less than you know you deserve. This corrodes the inner field. Thinking correctly restores this field. Little by little, day after day, no rush, with time. Internal time alignment is one of the greatest signs of prosperity. Those who are stuck inside are never satisfied. Those who live in inner harmony can endure waiting without anxiety. This waiting is not passive. He is confident. True trust doesn't speak loudly. She doesn't explain herself. She remains. And the world responds to those who remain. He always answered. When you think clearly, you stop fragmenting yourself into multiple possibilities. You choose. Choosing is like closing internal doors. And that is liberating. Too many doors drain energy. Choosing focuses. Concentration creates power. Power creates impact. Impact creates return. This return does not come as a reward. It comes as a consequence. The consequence is inevitable. Thinking correctly means aligning cause and effect. When the cause is stable, the effect is predictable. This creates internal security. And internal security is the foundation of any form of abundance that doesn't collapse. You don't need to do anything more. You need to get more aligned. You don't need to speed up. You need to support it. When this takes hold, something changes profoundly. Something within you stabilizes. You don't feel rushed. You don't feel constant fear. You feel their presence. And presence changes everything. Your energy changes. Your field changes. Your relationship with time changes. You sustain greater prosperity because you don't lose it when it arrives. That's the law. This is inevitable. This always works. Thinking correctly creates a type of stability that doesn't depend on external circumstances. It doesn't depend on immediate results. It does not depend on approval. It doesn't depend on guarantees. This stability is internal. Therefore, it cannot be removed. When you think correctly, you're not trying to get somewhere in order to feel whole. You're already a whole part. And that is precisely why the path opens up. Most people live according to an inverted logic. She believes that she first needs to conquer and then stabilize. First you need to do a lot so that later you deserve rest. First you need to prove yourself, then you can occupy space. This logic creates a lifetime of tension. Thinking correctly dismantles this logic. You get settled first. And only then does it move. This completely changes the relationship with effort. The effort ceases to be compulsive. Stop being anxious. Stop trying to fill a void. It becomes functional. One-off. That's enough. People who think correctly don't live with the feeling that it's never enough. They know when to stop. They know when to wait. They know when to move forward. This knowledge does not come from excessive analysis. It comes from internal alignment. When thinking is coherent, decision-making becomes simple. Even when the situation is complex, external complexity does not require internal confusion. This is one of the major differences between those who sustain prosperity and those who only touch it momentarily. A misaligned mind becomes confused when the scenario changes. An aligned mind adjusts without losing its axis. She doesn't panic. She doesn't dramatize things. She does not abandon her own position. She remains. And remaining is one of the most profound forms of power. Staying doesn't mean insisting blindly. It means not becoming fragmented. You can change direction without losing your identity. You can adjust strategies without altering your internal posture. That's what thinking right is all about. External flexibility with internal firmness. Most people do the opposite. External rigidity and internal fragility. That's why they break. Thinking correctly also changes how you deal with silence. A confused mind fears silence. She interprets silence as rejection, as a mistake, as a delay. An aligned mind recognizes silence as part of the process. She's not in a hurry to fill it. She doesn't make noise in order to feel alive. She trusts him. And true trust is not about heightened emotion. It is the absence of despair. When you think correctly, you don't try to control the future. You are sustaining the present. Sustaining the present is what allows the future to take shape. A misaligned mind tries to predict everything, anticipate everything, avoid everything. This creates constant tension. Thinking correctly releases this tension. Not because you gave up on results, but that's because you're no longer negotiating your identity with them. You are not what happens. You are what remains while it happens. This distinction changes everything. The aura of success is formed precisely there. When you don't get confused by the ups and downs, when you are not defined by external responses, you become a role model for yourself. And those who are internal leaders are not easily lost. Thinking correctly creates a kind of quiet dignity. You don't expose yourself too much. You don't humiliate yourself emotionally. You don't diminish yourself to be chosen. You'd rather not be chosen than betray yourself. This choice completely changes the quality of what reaches you. The world tests limits. He always tested it. When you think wrongly, you give in. When you think correctly, you stand by it. And the world learns. Learn how to deal with yourself. Learn how far you can go. Learn what is negotiable and what is not. This creates order. External order arises from internal order. A misaligned mind creates chaotic environments, recurring conflicts, unresolved situations, opportunities that begin but never conclude. An aligned mind generates continuity. Nothing extraordinary, nothing spectacular, just continuity. And continuity is what builds everything that lasts. Thinking correctly also redefines our relationship with time. A confused mind is either behind or ahead of schedule, or stuck in the past, or anxious about the future. The aligned mind is here, not because he doesn't care about what comes next, but because he knows that the future depends on the quality of the present. This presence creates a feeling of sufficiency. You don't feel like you're always owing something to life. You don't feel like you're always chasing after something. You feel like you're in process, and that's stable. Prosperity does not grow in unstable emotional terrain. It requires inner patience, no passive patience, but have unwavering patience, the patience of someone who knows they are aligned. Thinking correctly creates that patience, not as a moral virtue, but as a natural consequence of consistency. When there is no internal conflict, there is no rush. Haste always stems from the fear of losing something. But those who think correctly don't feel like they're losing. It feels like it's building itself. This feeling changes behavior. Change the way you speak. Change your posture. Without conscious effort, the body follows. Breathing follows suit. The gaze follows. Everything falls into place. An aura of success is not something you try to project. It's something that forms when you stop contradicting yourself. She is the side effect of an aligned mind. You don't need to learn how to have it. You need to stop sabotaging her. And the greatest act of sabotage is misaligned thinking. Thinking incorrectly is not the same as thinking negatively. It's about thinking in opposite directions at the same time. It's about wanting to move forward and protect yourself simultaneously. It is about desiring expansion while maintaining an active fear. This creates a confusing field. The world perceives confusion as a risk, and he walks away. Thinking correctly eliminates that risk. You don't promise what you can't deliver. You don't position yourself where you can't stay. This creates silent trust. Quiet trust opens doors that effort cannot, because effort can be seen as an attempt. Confidence is seen as capability. Thinking correctly creates ability, capacity to sustain what arrives. Even a misaligned mind occasionally attracts something, but then it collapses. He gets scared, clog, he lost. An aligned mind receives and retains. That's the difference. It's not about attracting more. It's about better support. Sustaining life requires calm. And calmness is not something that can be forced. It's something that takes hold when there's no internal conflict. Thinking correctly removes this conflict, little by little, without violence, without imposition. You don't need to fight with yourself. You need to unite. Internal unity is one of the most powerful forces that exist. She doesn't attract attention, but it changes everything. You start to realize that you don't need to adapt so much, that it doesn't need to adapt to every situation. You take the same center with you wherever you go. This simplifies life. Less wear and tear, less noise, less regret, more continuity. Thinking correctly also changes how you deal with choices. You are not stuck with the idea of choosing right or wrong. You choose coherent or incoherent. This change is profound because it eliminates the fear of making mistakes. You don't go wrong when you stay aligned, you just adjust it. And adjustments made based on consistency do not break identity. They strengthen. An aligned mind does not need to defend itself from the world. She trusts in her own ability to respond. This reduces reactivity. And less reactivity means more silent authority. Silent authority cannot impose itself. She is recognized. Thinking correctly creates that authority. Because you don't react to just anything. You don't explain yourself to just anyone. You don't need to justify yourself when faced with any discomfort. You choose, and sustained choice is power. The aura of success is built through choices sustained over time. Not on impulse, not through excess. Providing support requires emotional maturity. And emotional maturity stems from inner coherence. Everything comes back to the same point. Think correctly. When this becomes your natural state, something definitely changes. You don't feel like you're preparing to live. You feel like you're already living. This alters your energy. You don't run. You don't compete. You won't get lost. You stay, and the world responds to those who remain. He always answered, "That's not a promise. It's an observation." That's the law. When you think correctly, you become a stable point in an unstable world. And stable points organize fields around them. This organization is perceived as a symbol of prosperity, not just material things, but existential. You feel like your life has a center, that their decisions have continuity, that your presence carries weight. This weight does not oppress, he maintains it. And those who provide for it don't need to rush. You support more. You tolerate more. You get more without losing anything. Something within you stabilizes. You can feel it. You don't need to run. You foster greater prosperity. His presence has changed. This is inevitable. This always works.